Hello, and thank you for joining me on this podcast from Experience, the Grief Collection. I'm your host, Bianca Welsh. I'm a mum, a lost mum, a restaurateur with a behavioural science degree, and a proclivity for all things to do with trauma, grief, and mental illness. I've got a lot of personal lived experience, and this is the podcast I wish I had after experiencing my own grief and loss. So why would I do a grief podcast? What might I add to the vast podcast world? I'll provide you with stories that might help you feel seen, feel less alone in what you're experiencing or have experienced, perhaps an idea on how to navigate the healing journey, because there's no playbook for grief. There's no guide. We all grieve differently, thus we all heal differently. Perhaps you're helping support someone on their grief and loss journey. Maybe you're just curious about how some people overcome the worst time of their lives. The thing with grief is that this is the one given in life. It is the one thing we will all experience at some point, the loss of someone or something that we love. As the great wordsmith and musician that is Nick Cave quotes in a letter to a fellow griever, if we love, we grieve. That's the deal. That's the pact. Grief and love are forever intertwined. Grief is the terrible reminder of the depths of our love, and, like love, grief is non-negotiable. End quote. Yet we rarely talk about it in the Western world. We're never prepared for it, but perhaps we can never be prepared for it. I wasn't, but I hope if we were more open to talking about it and aware of other people's journeys and stories, we might feel less alone in the dark depths of grief, and perhaps the healing journey might not feel as daunting. Just a heads up, in this episode we talk about some sensitive topics, including baby loss, birth, stillbirth, termination for medical reasons, feticide, suicidal thoughts, and experiences of trauma. If you're not in the right headspace for that today, maybe come back another time. If anything in this episode brings up difficult feelings, please reach out to someone you trust or one of the supports listed in the show notes. I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the original owners of this island, Trawana Lutruwita, Tasmania. I'm on the country where the Taranata Panir, Paninaher and Lita Myarina clans of the Stony Creek Nation converged. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the deep connection to the land and waterways. I express my gratitude in being able to live, work and play on this beautiful country. Sovereignty was never ceded. I honour the rich tradition of storytelling as a vital way of passing down knowledge, culture and history through generations. If you haven't already listened to part 1, I'd suggest going back as this episode will make a bit more sense. You have to get over it.
Have you tried getting over it? Let's fucking go.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of mine and James's chat and explaining about what has worked and what hasn't worked for us in our journey of navigating grief.
Hello and hello to your listeners.
Thank you, James. So I want to start with you and ask you to painfully go back to that time. I know it's a very uncomfortable space for you.
Even more uncomfortable because you made me do it 3 times for the podcast.
I know, and that's what I was just about to explain, is that just to explain the visceral reaction you had to the last time we tried to do this and what happened for the rest of the day.
Good question. It was nausea. You tell me, I forgot.
You're like a cat on a hot tin roof. You felt like you wanted to run.
Yeah, that's a common one of mine when things get a bit uncomfortable.
And then you threw yourself into going to yoga, which we'll touch on that, how that has worked for you in recent times. But you hadn't been for months and you
Thought it was a good idea to be even more unregulated than I was.
Do you think speaking about it helped?
Yeah, definitely push things along.
So James, could you try and go back a little bit to the immediate aftermath of after we lost Herb and what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I guess collectively, if you want to combine all those periods, what it felt like was numb. Felt like it wasn't happening, like it was someone else's story.
Can you tell me a little bit about what has worked for you in the aftermath?
Things that have worked, looking back over an extended period of time from now to when her passed, which is 2.5 years.
3.
3.5.
Let's start that again. He's turned 3.
Do you like a discount it so then I can actually grieve?
What?
I can cut the number back so then I can grieve.
What do you mean?
I mean, the less it is, the more permission I give myself to grieve.
The less it is, the more permission you give yourself to grieve. I don't understand that.
So the longer the period,
Mm.
the bigger the expectation that you're over it, that you've grieved. So there's an opinion that, James, it's 3.5 years on. What do you mean you're still grieving?
Mm.
Why haven't you got it done?
Is that just a general feeling that you get from society, from your friends? Like, is it a specific thing?
Yeah, like there's a certain expectation that you have this period of time where you get on with it, you read the books, you speak to the therapist, you move on. And that's the part that still hurts me now because I'm the one that's chose to not feel it, not deal with it.
I wouldn't say it's not like you didn't deal with it. I think that was your way of coping, was to just kind of park it up for a bit, just for survival.
Yeah, but I haven't picked it up because it's been so fucking painful. But let's talk about what did work.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when I sit there and reflect, and it's not often, it's in a situation where I'm forced to, and there's minimal distractions, like a flat phone, a flat MacBook, a flat battery charger, and no petrol in the car. So I've got to sit there with a notebook and a pen and feel how fucking much it hurts. But I guess the top of the list is therapy. I did some work with my initial psychologist, and I guess it's some inroads, but it doesn't really give you the answers from that therapist that other interactions do, whether you go and see a therapist for depression or anxiety. I can use that reference because I've been to my therapist for many different conditions. Running with definitely with a purpose. So it's those events that I enter and wear her singlet and feel a tremendous pain that I get to live. I get to do this and he doesn't. And I get to do events like the Gold Coast Marathon with his name on my shirt and the bib, and the spectators yelling out, "Go Herbert." So in terms of that, really helped in terms of feeling alive and feeling that it's just you, a pair of joggers and a singlet and shorts, and drawing upon symbols that we reference to her, be the sunshine, or I've got a ring with his footprint that I touch multiple times through the event. Again, to feel, because in a day-to-day, I don't touch it.
For those that don't know, James is an incredible distance runner, an incredibly fast distance runner, and can really push himself physically. But I would say seeing you do races and running for purposes now is so different to before we lost her, because James has done plenty of races before, but I see a completely different set of expectations when you race now, and it's more about that connection to Herb, connection with the people around you. James also does programs for people and trains other runners. Would you say you find another level of purpose when you get to train other people to do a race? And what James does is he writes programs and doesn't charge them anything, and he has a thing called no PB, no fee. So if you don't get a personal best, you're not charged a fee, but that fee is not to James. He requests that people donate it to either Bears of Hope or another baby loss organisation that provided us with support. And I think that has given you such a different set of expectations. Instead of it being all about getting the best time, you almost just want to access it. It's your opportunity, I guess, to be with Herb, because you feel like that when you're running. And you can get a Bears of Hope running race singlet from Bears of Hope where you can get your baby's name printed on the bib, and James wears it religiously for any of the races he goes in. Would you say you do get comfort, is it?
Comfort, it's purpose. So I'll sit there and write programs multiple times a week, and I'll review data and encourage people and share my learnings of 25 years of running. And I guess I'm just always reminded as to why I'm doing it. And it's for not a monetary gain. It's for families like us in a situation of need that will get the support of important charities, whether it is photos with the bub, a couple of days old, or footprints, or a little bear. It certainly makes me speak to my athletes and say to them that be grateful for the opportunity to pin the bib on, because not all of us get that opportunity.
Yep.
I said to a mate, it was in Scotland overnight that I've been coaching for 3 months. I said to him, the final message I said before he started, I don't have any expectation. I might say that I no PB, no fee, but my expectation is that you're grateful for putting the bib on, because we not all get that opportunity.
I just think that's so special. It's a gift to everyone else, and we've always said that Herb was a gift to us, to remind us to love and to live, because he doesn't get to.
Yeah, and distance running, it speaks in a narrative that goes across all planes of life. We have this expectation to always run a personal best, but we're not always our best from day to day. We're not always our best from race to race. And I say to these guys that, yeah, I make a joke saying no PB, no fee, but it's there as a portal to not having the expectation that every time you show up, you got to be your best. It's about having the privilege of participating.
And what is next on your list?
I guess accepting, and that's the one that I'm still really working with, accepting what happened and why it happened. And my current psychologist has been sort of monumental in that space, because she gave me a pearl one day, and I've just always returned to it. Is she said, James, that's just the way the dice landed. And from that day, I've always picked it up and gone, she's right. Like, it wasn't meant to happen to us. There's no blame, there's no reason, there's no why. You pick the dice up, there's the chance of 6 different numbers. And Bianca and I have always spoke that the vast majority of the population expect to roll a 6 or a 5, and the majority do, but there's still those times that you just roll a 1 and you never expected it, you never prepared for it, you didn't think it was coming your way. So in terms of accepting, that piece of therapy and that piece of advice has been really powerful. But in terms of accepting what happened, I think I still live now not fully accepting it, because it just doesn't make sense. And we quite often ask, that's unfair or why us?
It defies the rules of what we're told is how life happens. You get pregnant, you have a baby. You don't expect to we didn't bury her, but you don't expect to say goodbye to a baby. It goes against the working model of the world. It is the most painful experience I think a human can withstand, and it still shocks us. I was going through some of my old messages and texts in preparation to do this chat during that time, and I still cannot believe that they're my words and that's how I was feeling and that it actually happened. Do you think that because you and I, we used to be such fate believers that I guess we used to think that everything kind of happens for a reason? The way we met, a lot of things that have happened along the way have been partially to do with luck and timing, and this has challenged our belief of that fate. Do you think it's thought of that?
It has, but it's also helped us subscribe to things do happen for a reason, and that's why we do call herb a gift, and the spaces that you've moved into and the spaces that I've moved into that we'd never pick up had this not happened. And there's certain things that we do with our living children that we wouldn't have done if Herb survived. So I'm not even going to call it a silver lining, but there is some gifts that this has given.
I don't like the concept that it did happen for a reason. I don't want that I had to say goodbye to my son, that there was a reason for that. But because it has happened, I want to turn that pain into not good. I want to turn that pain into something, I'm not sure of the word.
Yeah, it can go one of two ways. I think there's been families in our situation that haven't been able to weather the storm in terms of relationships and certain pre-existing mental illnesses, or some people fall into coping mechanisms that don't serve themselves or their families. So I think in terms of clicking subscribe, we've definitely gone for the fruitful.
Yeah, I like that concept. Like we've opted in. We've chosen to opt in.
Some other things like massage, and we touched on yoga, but I think the massage, particularly over the first couple of weeks, that both of us were physically beaten up in terms of, I know what a sore body feels like post a marathon, but it pales into this situation. I remember just being absolutely sore from head to toe, and the grief being caught in our thoracic sort of ribs or midsection, and we got a very kind friend that works in the physio space that came and treated us both, and she knows exactly what grief does around that area of the body, and a lot of people wouldn't believe it and think it's voodoo.
Well, you and I are so different in physicality, and our bodies are completely different, and where we hold tightness and tension and all those things and the exercises we do, we're so different. But when she came to treat us, she said you're holding it in exactly the same place, and it's sort of how your spinal system and like your ribs are all kind of numbered, and she's like, you're holding it in your third and fourth, which tends to be where you hold trauma.
Which was fascinating, and just so grateful to have a person like that, not only a friend but someone that was just happy to drop around and just so kind. And the yoga world, touched on that, I just sort of went down the rabbit hole of yin rather than fast-paced yoga. But I think the thing about yoga was more to do with the people and the community. Certainly a space that allowed me, even if I just went along to yoga and laid on my back and did nothing, I was surrounded by people that created a space for me to cry, think about her, do whatever I needed on that occasion. And those people are still there, and I haven't been back in a while, but I run into them in the street and they go, "Oh, we've been missing you. We've been talking about you." And I'm like, I barely said hello to you. But they acknowledge my presence as much as I acknowledge their presence. And they quite often say that the joy of yoga is done off the mat. I never fully understood it until afterwards, but it's true. You might only rock up there for an hour, but some of the shit you undo, you're left with the other 23 hours in the day to unpack it or just let it absorb back in. But it certainly shifts shit along in terms of trauma and grief, particularly in the hips. But it's something that I'd love to incorporate back in my day-to-day. It's a time poor sort of situation.
Do you think it's interesting that not a lot of males would tend to consider yoga? I know there was a handful of men and a few really great male instructors that you had, but do you think it's really interesting that a lot of men won't turn to something like that for what you turn to it for?
99% of men won't. And you looked around the room most nights and there'd be two males. But the beautiful thing about yin, it is female energy, and the female is a beautiful species that knows how to nurture, feel, care, and they extend themselves to everyone in the room and make sure that I was doing okay. There's times that I bolted from yoga because it was just too painful in the middle of the class, and there's other times that you're just having a bit of a chat in the change rooms on the way out. It's a community that's non-competitive and just really wholesome.
I think that's really nice. I've never thought about it, that yin is the female element. And I said to you, and I still can't quite articulate it, but I remember in the early stages afterwards that I find it perhaps remarkable that a woman's body can hold life, but it also can hold death. And I don't know how quite to explain that, but there was part of the journey, particularly after we had the feticide, that Herb was just in my tummy until we could go to hospital to have the birth the next day. And a friend, my very dear friend Alex, gave me some of the best words of comfort to say, all he knows is you, and all he knows is love and comfort and warmth.
Such beautiful words.
And I found that just so comforting. I really, really needed that. But it is like a woman's body is remarkable what we can hold, the energies that we hold. We can hold life. And I held death. I physically held death inside of me. Like it's, I don't know, it's a...
Yeah, I guess from conception to Herb passing is just spot on. All he knew was that he had a mum that took good care of him, nourished him, spoke to him, kept him in a warm place, kept him safe, kept him well fed. And you're right, it's a space that it's all Herb knows. It's all he knew. He knew that he had a mum and dad and a brother that couldn't wait to meet him.
Yeah, fine. I still use her words as comfort even to this day, thinking about it. What else is on your list, James?
Quite profound, and which I didn't think that it would be a situation where I deal with grief or my pain, is a mountain bike retreat that you got me for my birthday. And it's only just recently, so we're talking 3 years on. It was a 3-day mountain biking in Blue Derby with some wellness and massage and some yoga. Went solo with some random people from around Australia, but it certainly gave me an opportunity to go inside. And when I mean inside, I got to spend a moment to acknowledge that I hadn't accepted what was going on and there was still work to be done. So accepting that there was still a bucket load of grief within my body. And I was that pest throughout the whole 3 days that just wanted to constantly recite my story with the 4 other random people. I wanted to share our story and I wanted to tell them all about Herb, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, as James has not been a talker and not been much of a sharer, unlike me, I have a few drinks and I'm always that one at the parties now that becomes the trauma and grief person that's telling everyone their story if they haven't already heard it. For you to want to do that is remarkable.
Yeah, so I was quite shocked that that's the way I behaved. And after the weekend, my nervous system was properly fried because it played on all sort of strings. The mountain biking was high intensity and risk taking, and when I wasn't mountain biking, my nervous system was still in a unregulated state. So I certainly got my money's worth, and the guys that put the pods together, Tara and Steve, I sent them a letter afterwards just saying thanks for creating a space that I was able to just unpack some shit that I didn't know was deep, and for them to know that what they offer is sort of beyond your mountain biking bro. And I'm not judging, but the vast majority of the guests are there to use the beautiful trails of Derby, but I certainly got more than I bargained for. Another big one in terms of what did work were friends, particularly through food. Initially, we were inundated with meals, which was just kindness in spades. Some meals were just incredible, how food can say so much about the person, and we find nourishment in someone else taking care of us. Lots of hugs, and certain people would give you a hug and it was really restorative, and then other people would give you a hug and it was somewhat repulsive, but not to say that in a negative manner. But lots of different conversations with friends has certainly helped and still helps. And I always sort of circle back to running each morning at 5 a.m. It's more about the conversation during running and after running than the actual activity itself.
I think it's what anyone, I believe, that has experienced any type of grief finds it difficult to understand is how it is the furthest thing from linear. And hearing James speak to me, it hurts to see how much it still hurts, because we're 3 years down the track and even I have an expectation on it in general that it's not going to be as painful, but it is. It is as fucking painful as the day it happened. And society thinks you're a few years down the track and you're over it. You've moved on. And we hate the term moving on. We prefer the term moving forward because it means you take them with you, but it is the furthest thing from linear. And I remember us talking about it in those early days, and I think it was the first 6 weeks, going, oh my God, like this is just something we've never even bear witness to with some of our close friends and family that have experienced their own grief. What happens behind closed doors is not talked about enough. And I mean, that's the whole purpose of why I'm trying to do this, is that navigating it is really confusing and so overwhelming, and can still be confusing and overwhelming years, if not decades down the track.
And that's the reason why I feel so compelled to share the way I feel. I'm generally a closed book. As you know, I don't want to tell people how I'm feeling, and I've always had a bit of a stiff upper lip, suck it up, don't let people know exactly how you're feeling, which is complete wrong way to go around your business. But showing up and sharing this story, I always think about, is there another dad out there that's going through exactly what we went through? That one thing that I say that I did might help him, like going to a vineyard to chat with a mate and not talk a word about my grief or how I'm feeling, but to have a conversation with a mate and to do a common task and to have a space where I drove half an hour either way to just cry the whole way there and cry the whole way back. It was a space for me to flush my emotions and keep them private, which again is not always the best way of sharing the way you're feeling.
But it clearly worked for you, and so much so that it sticks in your mind as being a really pivotal part of your journey.
Yeah, very much so. And I thought about another mate of ours that lost a child. He used to go surfing, and all the way to the beach and all the way home he'd cry as well. But it was the act of surfing and the act where he was in his car by himself, maybe with music or maybe just with his own thoughts, but that was his space to deal with his thoughts and his loss.
Can I ask you about how you navigated work? Because in reflection of looking back on some messages and things that I'd sent, I had acknowledged how hard it was for you, because I could walk down the street or run into someone and they would say, "I'm so sorry for what happened," if they had the capacity or the guts, I guess, to acknowledge it. But sometimes if we were standing together, you would literally not be acknowledged, as it was your loss as well. And it made it so challenging in those really early stages afterwards that so many people, particularly of the older generation, found it that it wasn't, your loss was just not acknowledged because you're the dad. And I hate that you had that experience. And I reflected also at that time, in those first few months, I wanted to physically look like I was in pain. So I remember wanting to walk down the street, if I had the guts to walk down the street, almost like wincing in pain or having that look on my face, because I wanted people to know just a glimpse of what I was feeling on the inside, on the outside. And I remember when I started to go back to work, and it took me months, and I'll talk a little bit about my journey soon, that I remember I almost felt like I wanted the building, because we've been at Stillwater for so long, it's such a big part of our identity, that it needed to almost reflect how I was feeling. I wanted the building to almost be damaged. I wanted there something to be like a whole crack through the building so that people could see there was a physical representation to reflect what I was feeling. And of course that's not possible. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what that navigating back to work was like, because you went back about 10 days later and you just would do an hour in the morning, and often when there was not really many people around. And I know that was really important to you to help you cope, to feel as though you were doing something. But in reflection, do you feel like that did help?
No, it didn't. No, all it was another distraction. And I guess as a male, we get some satisfaction out of doing, and it just reiterated, entrenched a belief that I was okay and the world went on. So even though I got things done, I think I'd still return home with, if not more, pain than I left. A friend of ours mentioned that there's a certain grief period in her country where she was born, a certain extended period of days. And I sort of subscribe to that, and I'm very much a numbers person, so
40 days.
40 days. But for me, I need to run the numbers and go, okay, time's up. Show must go on. And I guess with our operation and the nature of our business, we have 2 performances a day, 6 to 7 days, 6 days a week. And
well, back then we were doing breakfast still.
So we got 18 performances a week, and the guest that's coming in doesn't want to see me crying in my soup. So I definitely felt like I had to park the way I was feeling. And I certainly felt incapacitated in terms of confronting the things that I'd confronted in the past that were quite simple, particularly challenging situations where you need to use the full breadth of your brain. So some very simple tasks became quite confusing. And there's situations where you just get a fuckwit customer that tells you that you can't count your child because he didn't live. So there's situations like that. And I will use the word fuckwit, and you can bleep it out, because to have a guy in his mid-60s turn around and say to essentially both of us, oh, he doesn't count as a child, I was just that. I'm still shocked and dismayed to even see the guy in the street. Like, I'm not enraged. I'm just absolutely fascinated how a human being can discount our situations. The arena we play in is so unpredictable, and from a day-to-day basis, we're seeing such a large pool of people. And then on the flip side of the coin, we saw some beautiful people that wrapped us up, shared that they've had a very similar situation 40, 30 years ago, told us what worked for them. It's not all bad stories. I see restaurants as a space as don't hop in the ring unless you're prepared to get a jab in the chin sort of thing. And for a very long period of time, and even to now, you got to be match fit. And it's shit that it's that way. It's shit that grief takes so much from you. And that's the point that we often make, is there's a pre-herb and a post-herb. But that's just how it is.
I think that what's really interesting through the process is even years down the track, things can still be confusing and difficult and hard, and you don't process things the way you used to. Like work, it can still be really difficult months, years post.
Yeah, and again, there's that expectation that shouldn't be that way. Should have got on with it. What do you mean? That happened years ago, mate.
Speaking about the before and after, looking at pictures of us smiling before we lost Herb to after, even when we have had really joyous moments since, we can definitely see there's a difference in our eyes, in our face, in the smile, like that we've been robbed of something. There is this innocence, and I look back at photos of before going, oh, you poor thing, you do not know what's coming for you. There's a naivety in the way we're smiling.
Yeah, I remember unpacking it with my psychologist and saying that personally, I not only lost a child, but I lost my wife that day. And I remember saying, I don't feel the same. She doesn't feel the same, even though you've come back as this incredibly powerful woman that Herb would be so proud of. I said to my psychologist, and I'm very much a black and white static dude, and my psychologist said, none of us are the same. None of us remain the same. Nothing stays the same. And that was something that I've always held on to, that the seasons change. Nothing's guaranteed. And for me, I was very much that there is a guarantee, that the goalposts are fixed. You do that, you get this. So, again, 3 and a bit years on, I'm still coming to terms with that. Fuck, the goalposts do move, and there's no guarantee.
Yeah,
and I also double down with my athletes, with the coaching, saying, you don't know whether this is the last race you'll ever get to put a bib on. You could be run over by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah, none of us know that, do we? I still distinctly remember feeling like my soul had been ripped out of my body and stomped on. And that part of me did die with him, and he took part of it with him, and I want him to have that part of me.
That gives me comfort to know that he has that with him. And you're right about the photos. Like, I saw a Bears of Hope Instagram post the other night from a guy that did this really tough ultra in New South Wales, and they lost a child. And I sort of dug deep on his Instagram to sort of see his pain and just look through the series of posts leading up to their birth and then post. And it's the same scenario, it's the same situation. The looks on Mum's face and the smiles on his face, they were never the same.
No.
And that's a grief in itself, to look back and go, I'll never be that person. My wife will never be that person. Claude will never get the mum that was around before her.
Mm.
But I'm not speaking in let's cry over a spilled milk situation. I'm speaking in a situation of that there is that grief. We've both been changed, and Claude's been changed as a person due to the circumstances we've had to experience.
And it's not all negative. I think the parent I've become is a lot more present. I'm a lot more grateful. I try to be as present as possible and to just show them as much love as I can. So I wouldn't say it is all negative, but I certainly am a different person to what I was before. So James, tell me the things that didn't work.
This list is probably a bit harder to understand because you have to really go back in time and reflect, but definitely isolating. So not connecting with your friends and family and those that you would normally share stories and meals and time and activities. Not feeling, which I've already sort of covered on that, but it's generally links into what I'm thinking, and drinking, particularly alcohol, and numbing a situation or distracting a situation certainly didn't help. Don't get me wrong, I didn't drink excessively, but it's certainly something that didn't help me get to work. It enabled me to withdraw, switch off, numb the way I was feeling rather than go to work and actually feel the feelings. Again, ignoring or being ignorant to the actual way I was feeling, and particularly grief and grieving, and there's a point that I've only sort of just arrived at. I knew I was grieving, but to what extent, and to compare my grief to yours or the way I was grieving. And we talk that grief and grieving's two different things. What didn't work was not journaling. I look back now and you did a lot of journaling, and I sat there and scribed out this at the pool when everything went to shit with my laptop and my phone, and I felt how cathartic it was to get pen on paper and to actually allow yourself some space to see exactly where you're at. And again, me being a black and white dude, I thought the journaling had to be something quite beautiful and correct, and a certain questions had to be answered and boxes needed to be ticked. But I soon figured out, and I've only scratched the surface, but I soon figured out that journaling can be messy, and it can be drawings, it can be heavens knows what. But to sit there for an hour while Claude was swimming and to try and unpack 3.5 years of shit that didn't work, I thought, wow, this would have worked. This journaling would have really worked some time ago. How was your experience with journaling?
I would attribute it to being one of the key pillars for me of coping and processing, and then for me to share some of those words along the way, either through short Instagram posts, or I went to a longer format and did a bit of a blog or journal when I was pregnant with Rani. And I found that really, really cathartic and really special that I could share that with other people. But personally, to journal and just to get all the thoughts out of my head and get it out of my body, I found really effective.
I think what didn't work was family, and this is a tough one because certainly don't want to seem ungrateful or disrespectful, but it's a tough space, grief and grieving for a close family and even broader relations, that a lot of the time people don't know what to do and can make situations more uncomfortable or challenging than they need to be. And that's not pointing the finger at any particular family members, but I certainly think for both of us it was something that didn't work.
We learnt, I can't remember who helped us understand it, was the ring theory of grief. and the concept of whoever is at the center of that loss is in the like rings of a tree, like you're right in the middle circle, and then on the next circle out is close friends and family of who's been associated with that loss, and then you've got friends and family. Then next ring you go out, you've got colleagues and acquaintances, and then next ring out's like onlookers sort of thing. And the concept is that you comfort in and dump out. So wherever you are in the rings to the loss, you need to dump out to your people on the outer and comfort to the rings within. And I guess not to point or to say anyone's at fault, but the way perhaps to cope, we're looking to us for comfort and we weren't able to give it.
No, I guess my primary focus was to take care of you and Claude, and that was all I had in my scope at that period of time. And even myself wasn't in that scope of work, which you don't have the bandwidth to look after too much more. And I think some people in our situation that even just to take care of themselves, to get up and get showered and get fed can be challenging some days. I think avoiding to talk to other lost dads is a real big one for me. And I'm pretty ashamed of it, to be honest with you. There's certain other lost dads that I just didn't want to even engage with because I knew what we had to talk about and I knew how painful it possibly could have been. But when I look back now, it doesn't seem as scary as it possibly would have been, but I certainly distanced myself from other dads that I knew that had lost because, yeah, we shared something, but I didn't want to make them feel any more pain than was necessary, and I guess I wasn't prepared to feel the pain either. But I had a chat to a lost dad last weekend and we had a chat about all sorts of things, but we didn't talk about loss, which I was quite surprised. And I reflect back going, shit, I've avoided this guy because I thought the first thing he'd bring up would be baby loss, and we just didn't talk about it. So I think it's something that I could have done better, and avoiding talking to them certainly didn't work.
Because there's just an unsaid presence and understanding you've got of each other, isn't there? When you know the other person has been through something almost exact to what you – I mean, everyone has a different experience and a different story, but you have an unsaid connection and there's comfort in that, do you think?
There is, and there's times that I wish I wrapped up those dads and didn't go the other way. It's funny, as blokes, we tend to not talk about the elephant in the room. And even in other situations, it's a bit tougher to navigate than rather than to talk about the weather or the footy. This one's a bit of a tough one because I'm not too sure whether it did or didn't work, but a belief that I had to be the strong one in the relationship, that whether it's a misogyny sort of male-female thing, but I definitely felt that it was my turn or responsibility to be strong and to stand up and to shelter and protect and provide for my family. And whether that did or didn't work for me, and I hope it worked for my family, but it's definitely something that there gets a point where, I don't know, it's brutal to say, but the show's got to go on and there has to be someone that takes that leadership role. Well, there doesn't have to be, but I took a lot of comfort out of shielding, particularly you, from people that I thought that were going to hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely did take that protector role, and I'm very grateful for that, especially during the time when everything was going wrong with Herb. I reflect that in my messages to one of my best friends was when we were in hospital and they asked how you were going, and I said, yeah, you've crumbled. And I said I knew that you'd almost been too amazing in the lead up, And then once he was born, I guess you could let down your guard a little bit because you could let down your guard for me. And then, yeah, I would agree in the aftermath, especially with how anxious I was to leave the house because of the physical nature of the female being the one that's visibly pregnant. I had a lot of fear of walking down the street and someone congratulating me on the baby. And then the guilt and the shame I felt about that. I couldn't leave the house without James for weeks. And it wasn't until I did a social post, which felt really icky to do it, but I felt that it was my step towards reintegrating with the real world. And then when we would go out into the real world, you would need to be my protector, because I did get congratulated and I did get people come up to me and say some really odd things, and I would just freeze. Like, normally I'm very quick to think or respond, or I can easily defend myself, but everything, all my guards were down. And so, yeah, you definitely had to be that person. And for Claude as well, there were circumstances, I can't even give you a specific one, but there would have been things at school or questions Claude would have been asked, and I know that you're the one that stepped up to help him navigate through that, because I almost went like mute, I think, sometimes during those times. Like, I just felt so much, and I still do. I still feel so much guilt and shame that I'm the one that's brought your pain and suffering and Claude's pain and suffering, because it happened in me. And I know that that's irrational. I know that's not logical.
And it's not true.
But I still do feel that it is. Like, I guess that's the trauma, the PTSD, kind of a very typical symptom in that is the guilt stuff. And it still hurts me when I see you upset or Claude upset.
And I know that, and that's a part too where I try not to be as visible, because I just don't want to give you more anguish than you need.
No, but it doesn't. I don't expect that, and I don't want that, because I don't want you to deny how you're feeling. And it happened, and I know, like I do know deep down, and I've done a lot of work and a lot of therapy, but I've said to my therapist, I'm no longer actively seeing her at the moment, but I did say to her that there will always be a part of me that believes it was my fault.
Yeah, which I think is just so unfair that you have to wear that burden. To circle back a bit to when we did go out and those times that I did have to shield and field the inquiries, I remember even months or even years on, you kept saying to me, James, you don't need to keep padding the conversation out. You don't need to constantly ask about them. They're trying to ask about us. And I was this front foot guy. Everyone we'd run into, I'd ask 82 questions about them in the hope that they would not ask a question about us. And I thought that method was a clever tactic to protect Bianca. But in the end, Bianca's like, for fuck's sake, can you shut up? I'm okay. And even years on, there was times that I'd get my work done and I'd rush home because I thought I had to be back here to shield and protect her. And at that point, you said, I got it. I'm good. I don't need you here to – but that is I don't know whether that's the mollycoddling method that I thought was the most effective way to protect you.
I forgot about that.
But
we used to have lunch together every single day after. I guess we sadly had the luxury of time in the day because Claude was at school. So James would maybe go to work in the morning and then come back, and we'd always have lunch. We might go out or we'd stay at home. And I remember that. I remember it got to a point where I was like, can you just stay at work? Can you just like fuck off? Because I'm not getting anything done.
But that's the bond that we got though. We've got this bond because I guess I found comfort in being in your presence as well. As much as I say that, I come back to shield or protect you from something that you don't need shielding or protecting. I think we joked that you became my binky, my security blanket, that I again, I avoided some situations that I needed to go through, and by avoiding them, I just made them 28 times worse. I guess I touched on it as, trying to reason why. And I'm saying it didn't work because there is no reason why. And I guess I might have already covered off on it, but the more I tried to go, why us, it didn't serve me because there is no reason. And it is a situation of ill fate or chance. And it wasn't sent to us, and it wasn't deliberate, and it wasn't chosen. It was misfortune. So now we've covered off on my 82 different things that didn't work. What worked for you?
I am an information seeker. I want to be the expert, and because it was in the realm of psychology, I felt like I could tackle it to a degree. So we left the hospital and I went on Booktopia and I ordered 4 grief books, a couple specific to baby loss and then a couple of others that were just general. And I went looking for stories and people and other women that had been through what I'd been through because I felt so alone. I knew of people that had experienced a stillbirth, but I didn't know of anyone specifically or in my memory that had experienced what we went through, a termination for medical reason. And I felt like it was just this extra layer and this extra bit of shame and taboo-ness that I needed someone's help to navigate. And so I remember looking through some hashtags on Instagram and looking for people, and I couldn't really, I think I found a couple and I found a little bit of comfort in that. But the TFMR space, not like it is today, it's definitely much better. There's still a long way to go. But at the time when it happened to us, there was not much around. But I would say the biggest thing that's got me through is connection, and it was finding my people. It was finding my lost community. And we've spoken before about my very close friend Emily, and I really attribute my connection with her and our similarities of the way we think and the similarities of our situation. We both had a living child around the same-ish age. We're both having boys. We're both very career focused and driven, and we've got a lot of similarities in the way we think about the world. We're both quite cynical. And
I sort of think about the beautiful part of particularly females is they seek that similar information. They seek those people in similar situations, and they're so happy to share, support, and again, share what did and didn't work for them.
Yep. And we'd had so many similar experiences post of people congratulating us, or we even shared the same obstetrician up here, and we just really, really connected and bonded, and we'd found a lot of solace in each other. We would message each other multiple times a day just with a thought of what we were experiencing or thinking, or did this happen to you? Or so yeah, that finding my people was a huge thing. And then I connected with a few others in our community, people that I know but hadn't really known that well. A big one was someone who'd been through a loss 30 plus years ago, and she's done some amazing charity work, and she works at the hospital, and she's got an organisation that does a heap of amazing work in Africa. And she just definitively, she was so clear and sure when she said, you will find your purpose and you will be okay. And I remember how much I needed that, because no one else, I think, could give me that assurance. Everyone, I guess, was tiptoeing around and making sure that we were okay. And
I think you're spot on, and I remember that too. And it was like an elder basically saying, this has happened and you will be okay. It'll take time.
Yep.
It'll hurt like hell.
And then some other friends that, again, not close with at the time, now we've become closer, but a friend that James went to school with, she had a stillborn 10 plus years ago. And I remember looking at her and knowing she's still here. And I don't mean that in a suicide sense, but in the immediate aftermath of everything. I felt like something was going to fall out of the sky and just take me.
It's evidence. What you're saying is evidence that you will be okay.
Yep.
And it's a good way of seeing it because you're right, at the time you can't see beyond
No.
the next hour, the next week.
That's right. Yep. And I just needed to see those examples to know that I'll be okay. She's still upright. She's still working. She's had children. Like, she's here. And I felt like I couldn't be here. Like, I wanted the earth to swallow me up and take me. I was in so much pain. And I've never been, I can hand on heart say, I've never been that mentally unwell. And my heart goes out to people that have. And James has certainly had many of his challenges through his time of feeling like you want to end it. And I just wanted something to take me. I didn't want to leave. But the pain I was experiencing, I thought, I'm not going to survive this. So finding examples and connection was really key to me. A lot of it was in the little moments and the little concepts and maybe an image or a poem or a letter. I quoted in the intro about Nick Cave's letter, and I'll link it in the show notes. It was a really important piece for me to understand that when there is love, there is grief. And I found solace in that. It justified how much pain I was in because I had so much love for the little human that we had created and that had grown in my belly for 9 months. So I really found those little pockets, just the little things, the concept of that there's a hole inside you and there's like a little, and I'll find it and I'll put it on the website, a little image, a cartoon image of a hole, and that the hole never gets smaller. But what you do is you grow around it. Those visuals helped me conceptualize what I was feeling, and I'd almost imagine that hole in the middle of me, that it was this huge hole, but there's these things growing around.
I heard it explained the other day in terms of a rock inside a balloon, which is the same. It's the rock is the grief. It doesn't go anywhere. It's hard. And then the space between the rock and the balloon needs the feel, needs the fluff.
And we also like the weight concept, and we use this as well when we're talking about mental illness and poor mental health, in that it's like a muscle. You got to train the muscle, so it's like a weight. The weight of grief never gets any lighter, but you get stronger. One other thing that really helped was doing a physical thing. So I did find doing a little bit of martial arts. I used to do martial arts back in the day, and Claude was doing taekwondo. And so I decided to hop in, and it's a different discipline to what I used to do. I didn't do it for long, but I remember feeling I'd get that lump in my throat when I'd do classes with Claude and like 50 other people, and I'd get that lump in my throat, and I'd almost feel like the grief was moving through my body, and I could express it in kicks and punches and throws, and I found that to be quite therapeutic. And that has been found to be very effective for trauma treatment. I don't know if there's any research about grief treatment, but martial arts has been found to be really effective.
Certainly prior to Herb, I would never have thought you'd run up Mount Wellington for the world's toughest half marathon.
Yeah, so that was definitely something that was never, ever, 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 ever in my wheelhouse. I'm not a runner. I don't like running.
If you see her running, you run too because something's chasing her.
I've done my fair share of 5K fun runs, and I like to do park run, but I'm by no means a distance runner. And I had run into a very dear friend of James's and ours. We ran into him the day of the feeder-side, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, what are you guys doing down here?" Because we're in Hobart, and he lives in Hobart, and we just honestly told him, and he was just in shock.
To see his reaction, I still feel it now. He just showed so much compassion, and he's got a couple of young kids himself, but you could tell straight away we sort of knew the situation we're in, but to see it on someone else's face, you could see the anguish to go, oh, fuck, this is shit.
Yep. And I then ran into him. I was down there for work like maybe 6 or 7 months after Herb. And I ran into him, and he owns and runs the Point to Pinnacle race here in Tasmania. So you run up Kunani, Mount Wellington. It's touted as the world's toughest half marathon.
It's not touted, it is.
So it's 21.1 kilometres all uphill.
1,296 metres of elevation gained.
And James is a freak of nature. And what's your record?
About an hour and 40, I think.
Which is nuts. I ran into him in town and he said to me, are you going to do Point to Pinnacle? And I was like, oh, God, no. And he said, he just looked at me with those eyes and said, everyone does it for a reason. Oh, and I still remember going, oh, man, you've got me. I said, all right, I'll enter.
And I guess he's been doing running events for 20-odd years. He's seen people in similar situations to us with their why and seen how an activity or an event with some purpose of suffering and meaning, he knew you needed it and he knew what you'd get from it.
I would go to say it was life-changing doing the event. The training was really hard and I got injured because I've never done distances like that before, and I was overweight after the pregnancy, and I guess
had a poor coach.
No, I had a good coach. James obviously coached me. So we decided to raise money for Bears of Hope, which we've spoken about before, is a great organisation that does incredible work for families like ours, and we wanted to give back. So we ended up raising $13,000, which we're still really proud of. So a cuddle cot is, I think it's $9,000. Maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe it's 10. A cuddle cot is what they use in the hospitals to keep the babies from deteriorating. So it's the chilled cot, and they're not cheap. And surprisingly, not every hospital in Australia has one. And so we thought we'll raise money for a cuddle cot. In the end, though, our money went towards the hospital packs, and there's over 300 bears, because what you get given in hospital is a teddy bear that has the name of a baby that's already passed on it. And I remember us receiving it going, oh, there's another family out there that knows what we're feeling. I mean, there's thousands, there's tens of thousands of families that know what we're feeling. But in that moment, we felt so less alone, and we've still got that bear. And I asked them to write, because they handwrite the name on the tags. And they said, what name would you like on there? And I was like, oh, I would really like Herbert Elio Theodore Welsh. And when they sent me a picture, I thought, oh my God, the poor person that's had to write his very long name. I think it was 370 bears they ended up having to write it on. I love knowing that his name is out there and it's helped a family feel less alone in that moment.
They sent us a shot of the bears all lined up, and to see the 300 bears is just crazy.
Yeah, it was really moving.
We sent it to some people that donated some things to raise the money. We're like, this is where your donations ended up, which is so powerful.
We had a little team, some of our really close friends and some of our friends that aren't that close that wanted to get involved, and it was so meaningful. So on the day, it was pouring with rain, it was freezing, it was not very good conditions. But halfway up, the sun came out and it was so fucking hot. I wanted to do it in 3 hours. It took just a bit over 3 hours for us to do it. James basically dragged me up, holding my hand, dragging me up, because I wanted to stop. I wanted to walk off course, but James really got me through. And there were so many points where I wanted to stop, but I would constantly think, Herb doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to live. He doesn't get to experience any of these things, so I've got to fucking keep going. And the money as well, the funds we raised also in my mind helped me keep going. But what was really life-changing was that our friend was right. Everyone is there for a reason. And there were some people that had tops to do with brain cancer. There were all sorts of people, because you can choose which charity you raise money for. And there was just this energy in us all suffering up this bloody mountain that we were all suffering for something. We were all experiencing immense emotional pain and physical, but we were all doing it together. It's really hard to explain. There was a guy that we kind of sometimes we'd overtake and then he'd overtake us, and we kind of kept chopping and changing. And he had a 20-kilo backpack on, and he had a sign to say 20-kilo backpack, and he was doing it for brain cancer. And I remember saying to James, like, that's what it feels like to carry grief, is it feels like you've got this 20-kilo backpack on all the time.
Yeah, and they're the things you subscribe to or you see, particularly when you are deep. The times I've been in marathons, you see things that you can really only see when your brain and your body are in complete suffering.
Mm.
You find metaphors and you find significance in guys like that.
Yep. And I've gone on to do a couple of other races as well. And like James said before, they somehow help me access him. They somehow help me access Herb in a way you can't when you're not physically exerting yourself. I don't know if it's a spiritual realm or something, but
I think you open yourself up. You're basically going to battle. And I remember walking to the start line of the MCG last year, and I really had no intention to even race it until about 3 or 4 days out. But I remember walking there 5:30 a.m. with a really dear friend, and I just burst into tears because I'd opened myself up to particularly getting on board or connecting to her, but I had no expectation that day that's the way I'd feel. And I think it's by showing up and allowing yourself to fall apart, to be put back together.
mm-hmm. Some other things that helped, it's quite a specific example, but in those really early days, I wanted to be social, but I knew I couldn't handle a lot. So I would plan one thing a day, and then I knew that the next day I couldn't do any social outing. I just needed to process or to sit at home or to do my own thing.
Mine was one a month.
Commemorating him was a really important thing. I mean, I'm a typical millennial female. I'm a bit of a hoarder. I like photos and holding on to things from the past, and I got photos printed and put around the house. I got jewellery. Well, my friends very kindly gave me a beautiful bracelet with his birthstone on it, and that kind of then propelled me to get all these other bits of jewellery. So I got his footprint on a necklace. I got the footprint ring for James. Candles, like all sorts of things I got around the house to commemorate him helped. And then I went on the journey of tattooing myself with anything and everything to do with him. So I've got
probably too many to count.
7.
She's been invited by a local bikie organisation part of it.
No, I have 7 small tattoos that have significance to do with Herb. But I remember on my last lot of just getting a couple of small ones, because I like to go to, there's a couple of tattoo artists in Hobart that I like to go to, and I remember driving home and I was getting upset thinking that I'm running out of things to tattoo about him, because when you only got 2 days in the hospital of someone who's not breathing, you can't make new memories. You can't create new things. And so what we have are finite.
So what is it about the tattoo? What is it the pain? Is it the forever? What is it? Why tattoo?
Yeah, I'm a bit sadistic, masochistic maybe. I do like the pain of the tattoo, and I do like the relief after. I've always liked that sort of pressure in life. Like, I love doing exams, but I hate assignments because I loved the pressure of an exam, and then afterwards I'd feel really good, like I'd achieved something, whereas an assignment was just a slow burn. You'd hand it in and it wouldn't feel momentous. So I do like the after of a tattoo and the adrenaline you've used, and then feeling like you've got through something painful. But I just like having those things on me all the time. I feel like they have so much meaning to me and that I get to wear that every day is really important. So I am planning on more tattoos, much to James's disgust.
How many tattoos do I have, Bianca?
0. James is a clean skin. I'm trying to convince him to get one. Talk therapy for me was helpful. I wouldn't say it was the magic bullet, but I definitely think it assisted in my healing. I was going to my psychologist fortnightly, and then that extended out, and she gave me a lot of assistance with my thought patterns, because I was really surprised when I was diagnosed with PTSD, but I thought I could beat it. I thought I was like, I don't know. I didn't think I could get it as such, which is ridiculous. With everything I know about the brain, I was very naive to think that I could not get it. So I really, really needed assistance to work through that pattern of thinking. And for me, as I've already said, a lot of that was around the guilt and the shame and just the processing of it all. I really needed to talk it through with someone who was completely third party and not have to dump it on you or anyone else. It was really helpful. And I think that's what can be challenging in grief when you experience it with someone else. I think what James and I found surprising towards kind of that 4, 5, 6 month mark is how lonely, I mean, even in the early stages, but definitely as time progressed, was how lonely grief is. Because even though we went through it together at the same time, the way we processed it, we were on completely different trajectories. So perhaps after probably 6 months, when there'd be a day when you weren't completely and utterly overwhelmed with grief and you sort of started to be able to navigate the world a bit better, there'd be some days where you would be completely derailed and be really feeling all the feels, but the other person wasn't. Whereas in the early days, you're both so immensely and utterly hurting that as time goes on, you kind of tic-tac. Like one day you're feeling the things and the other day you're not, but then the other person's on the other spectrum, and it just feels really lonely.
And in those blissful moments too, we both feel the same. Is there could be a moment where we're on a family holiday, 4 of us are on the beach, and it's just absolute and utter bliss. Everyone's having a good time. You're relaxed, and that's the moment that it just washes over you in this intense sting almost.
That he's not here.
That it happened. And it's not until those that have experienced exactly what I'm saying probably know exactly what we're talking about, because it just doesn't make sense. The sense of it is, what do you mean you're in a blissful situation where you have the privilege of a family holiday and you've got these living children around you and you've got your health and a cold beer and happy days? What do you mean your brain's just jumped to this painful thought?
And geez, the sting of it was so harsh in those first couple of years. We've just become so well practiced at it now. I often found, like, on the takeoff of a plane, going on a trip, seeing Claude at a school assembly, those secondary losses that a lot of people don't realise, that grief is not just in the loss itself. It's in all the everyday losses. So I inserted myself so much into so many situations in those early days where I'd see a woman with a pram, oh, that should be me. A pregnant woman, well, that should be me. A woman with a baby, a family with a baby, a dad walking down the street with the baby carrier. I would just sob at seeing that, because I wanted so much to see James with that. Like, that's one of my favourite images, is seeing James with the baby, seeing a dad walk down the street with a pram, seeing families of brothers, 2 brothers. There were so many times, and I would either have to avert my eyes, I would have to leave the room, I would have to leave. It would derail me so much. It would get me so upset.
I saw it like 3 days ago. I'm at the coffee shop with Rani. A mate's wife rocks up, 2 young boys, youngest the same age as her, wrestling the whole time we're there, just having so much fun. And I see it and I look at how much joy they're having, but immediately my brain goes to, that should have been Herb and Claude.
But I remember you didn't see that for months. I remember like it was months after and you're like, oh, I get it now. Because I used to say it all the time and you're like, I finally get it. I felt it.
Yeah, and I think you have to feel it because you can fantasize something, but Herb was never a fantasy. Herb was a living child.
He was about to be here. He was days away from being here. And I think for the woman is better at imagining what life looks like when the baby's here. Like the sense of the practicality and the pragmatic nature of what a woman needs to do. Right, so you can have the birth and I need to organise the breast bump, I need to organise the nappies, I need to all these bits and pieces. What would my day look like? Depend on their sleep and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I think that for the dads, it's very different. You do when they're here. You figure it out when they're here, when they're in your arms. And because I'd imagined it so much, like the empty arm syndrome, like that's a physical phenomenon that some research shows is true. My arms felt heavy for weeks after because I should have had a baby in my arms and he wasn't there. It's a bizarre thing to describe, but that empty arm thing was really a physical reminder for weeks. And then I remember when we took Claude first to school, because it was only a couple of weeks after he died, and dropping him off at school was torture. And I remember feeling for weeks devastated that we will never see Herb at his first day of school. And I used to think that was a linear trajectory of like, oh, that will just happen on the first year, maybe a little bit on the second year, and I'll be okay. But of course, this year, I didn't cry in the classroom, but once we left the school grounds, I burst into tears. I was like, of course I'm going to feel this. I'm going to feel this every fucking time Claude and Rani get to do things that Herb never gets to do.
I think it's the situations or events that are charged with emotion. And you're right about that first day of school, and I'm sure they're going to be the same with Rani, is that I straight away go, there's that extra weight of fantasising what Herb would look like with a shirt and tie and a backpack, and it's those milestones that we are utterly grateful for.
Mm. The fantasising of what would he look like at 1? Oh, now he's 3 and a bit. What would he look like now? What sort of, because he had this amazing head of hair. How crazy would his hair be? What sort of personality would he be like? Those opportunities to imagine that diminish as time goes on and life gets busy. But it was in the little moments, like a very dear friend, she's got a dessert stall at the market, and Claude gets a cupcake from her pretty much every time we go. And she very kindly would just drop us treats around to our doorstep.
She has remained the same price for Claude over a 7 to 8 year period. She hasn't increased the price, and Claude just goes up with the same denomination, and she hasn't got the heart to tell him that with CPI and the current inflation rates that what Claude was paying for a cupcake is probably now double.
And I remember she dropped some Kiss biscuits off and she messaged me. She just dropped them at the door, didn't have any expectation that I needed to see her. And she said, oh, I think Herb would have liked Kiss biscuits. And I still get teary talking about it because not many people have the ability to imagine or to bring your lost person into the present. And that brought him into the present for me.
It couples in, when I should have mentioned it, it has helped for me, couples in with our ladybird and the number of 2s that on a daily they constantly remind us, and for me they constantly help me the twos just tell me that Herb's saying you're in exactly the right place, Dad.
Yeah.
And that's my attachment to the twos.
Yeah.
And the ladybird I found the other night, I had an absolute prick of a day, but I saw the ladybird in a space that it shouldn't have been, in our bedroom on the second level.
Yeah.
And it just said to me that, you're right, Dad, it's fine. And that's what I take from it.
Yeah,
And the same as the kiss biscuits. I eat the kiss biscuits and I just think about Herb.
Yep, same. And I always get them whenever I see them. We get them for the kids whenever we have the opportunity to. And it's just in those little moments, I think, when people want to support someone around grief, it's in little pockets. It's in buying them a cup of coffee, surprising them with a biscuit, getting them a book that's made them think of their lost person, or it's just a poem or a photo or a sunset, or it doesn't need to be in these really big, grand and long things. It could literally take a minute out of someone's day, and they are probably the things that have meant the most to us along the way and continue to do so. So I think acknowledgement is another really big thing. And I was looking through messages and reminded of how well children do this. And a mum had messaged in that first week of Claude going back to school and saying how she saw Claude go up to her son and say, "Oh, my brother died. He got a bug in his tummy and he died." And I think, the boy just kind of responded like, "Oh, okay." And then they just ran off and played. And just that acknowledgement, like there's been so many times, especially in that first year, of when people just didn't acknowledge it. They couldn't say anything. And I understand the discomfort, but my goodness, it used to derail me. It used to get me so upset when people wouldn't acknowledge our loss. And kids just do it so bloody well.
You're right, and I totally forgot about that. That was fucking brutal. I remember hearing that, and it's the other kids in February or March talking about their summer holidays, and they asked Claude what he was up to. And to say my brother died, to me it just reminds how fucking enormous and painful is what happened to us.
And Claude was a big part of how we healed.
Well, not only Claude, but I think the number one thing, and I should have said it at the top, is Rani is the number one.
Yeah.
And it's not by my design. It's Bianca that came and said, I want to do this again. And 99% of people said, you're fucking mad.
I know, and I find I'm reluctant though to give it as the number one thing, because I remember thinking I don't have the strength to do it. And I really empathise with people and families and women that don't have the capacity or the physical ability to do it. Perhaps it was an IVF, perhaps then just not able to fall pregnant again. I don't want it to make it that it is the number one, but it certainly has brought an immense amount of healing to both of us, to Claude.
Oh, and the joy that she offers us on a day-to-day basis is, for me, I look at her and sometimes go, shit, it feels like Herb's in you. Well, we often joke that she's met her, but we're fortunate enough and privileged to experience a third child.
I might have said in the previous episode about how she was due and she was going to be delivered on the 222nd day of the year. So we were certain that Herb had a hand in selecting this little soul for us. She has brought so much to this family. But then that's sometimes I feel guilty about it too, because she's only here because Herb's not. And I grapple with that sometimes. And I've spoken about it on my socials before, about how sometimes I find I've got like 4 or so different channels going in my brain at once. I imagine life is as it is. Then there's this channel that's on that is with Herb here and Herb healthy. So with 2 boys and not her. And that's really, it's confronting. Then I imagine the next channel is Herb is here, but he's not well. He's severely disabled. and that we're navigating that world and life is completely different. And then there's this example of when they're all here, all three of them, and they're all healthy and happy.
So
and then there's another one where none of it happened. Like it's
yeah, and I envy that because I just don't have an imagination. I can only deal with what I can see and that's real directly in front of me. But yeah, for me, it's not as easy saying just, go and have another kid. But for you to be so brave and so courageous with even the thought of doing it, I can't imagine some of the thoughts must have gone through your head with the third pregnancy in terms of how challenging it must have been and the birth and everything.
Yeah,
But
it needs a whole episode.
Totally.
Chat
You can't just.
No, it was. We were looking at some trauma PTSD screening questions. It was after she'd been born, and I looked at it. It's on a Likert scale, so like extreme is one end and not extreme is the other end, basically. And I looked at the questions and I thought, oh my God, if I answered this whilst I was pregnant with her, I would have been extreme on every question. Like my PTSD would have been, if I was assessed at the time, off the charts. Like it was the second hardest thing I've ever had to do was get through that pregnancy, second only to saying goodbye to Herb for that final time. That's the order of fucked things that we've been through. But I distinctly remember when Herb was being born and cut out, I remember thinking, I will go through this again for our family.
And to be in that mental space in that situation, I just can't even fathom that strength and that thought.
It was a really distinct thought.
Like you wouldn't blame anyone to go, I'm never, ever want to feel this pain again. And we were told that this won't happen to you again. But there was a chance.
Yeah, exactly. But there is still a risk.
And to be told that essentially categorically that it won't happen again. And I remember deep into Rani's pregnancy that he got a bit unwell and every alarm bell went off in my head. I was like, you told me this couldn't happen again.
Yeah, it was horrific. Absolutely horrific. Continuing things that work for me and don't work for me. I will say breath work. I did a couple of sessions of breath work with a dear friend. And breath work, for those that aren't aware, are very effective for trauma, very effective for a range of mental illnesses. And there's all sorts of different techniques, and some techniques are ideally meant to get you in the state as if you were microdosing psychedelics. It's meant to get you in a different state of mind. And I had these sessions and I went into a place where I could smell him, I could touch him. Like the smell of him was so clear, and it hadn't been like that since we'd left him in hospital. And I just got this clarity. It was a very powerful experience. And I've only done a couple of sessions. I'd love to do more. One more, actually, was seeing a medium. And I am not spiritual at all. James is the one that is into the woo-woo stuff. And I got so much out of it. And yes, I am sometimes skeptical of these things, and I still am. And I still went into those sessions thinking, is what she's going to say to me is just a matter of deduction of things maybe she's seen on my social media or whatnot. But some of the things this reading gave me and the things that she had to share with me, no one outside of James and I would know. Not a single soul. And I take a lot of comfort from that. The things she said in that, of the things that he said to her, I choose to believe, and I choose for it to give me comfort. And some people might not. I think it really helped me and the way I think about everything. And I'm surprised that James is the one that's into this sort of stuff and he hasn't had a reading. Is it because you're too scared about what she'd say?
Not necessarily, no. I guess it's just another avoidant behaviour. Don't want to feel how painful. Even just discussing it might be.
Mm.
At least I'm consistent with all my behaviours. They're all avoidant.
Just to circle back quickly with Claude, the fact that we had to get up and get into school and put food on the table, I think whilst it felt immensely difficult to do at the time,
Certainly helped.
it helped, definitely. It gave us structure in the day and we had to show up for him.
We had to show up as a husband and wife as well.
Yeah.
We had to make sure our relationship was strong and invested and supportive, because I'm sure there's been plenty of mums and dads that have separated in situations like ours.
Yeah, having you and having the relationship that we do and the ability for us to communicate the way we do is probably the number one thing that's got me through.
And I'm certainly grateful for it.
And I think that's a really nice note to finish on. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Joining me to unpack the last interview is Dr. Mai Frandsen. She is a psychologist, health behaviour change consultant and researcher based in Tasmania. She earned her PhD in psychology in 2012 and is internationally recognised for her work in promoting health behaviour change using incentives. Dr. Frandsen is the owner of Trig Psychology, a private practice located in Tasmania, where she focuses on health behaviour change, working with first responders, adolescents and adults navigating significant life transitions. Her approach is characterised by authenticity and pragmatism, drawing from her varied life experiences. She uses a range of psychological treatment paradigms to get the best outcome for her clients. In addition to her private practice, Dr. Frandsen serves as a psychologist in schools and is an associate researcher at the University of Tasmania. Her research primarily focuses on smoking cessation, particularly among pregnant women, and has led Tasmania-wide clinical trials exploring the efficacy of novel, incentive-based interventions. Having stepped away from active research, Mai's passion project is science communication and can often be heard on ABC Radio sharing mental health hacks. Originally from Denmark, she has called Tasmania home since 1994. Beyond her professional pursuits, she enjoys engaging in outdoor adventures, endurance sports, and travelling both locally and abroad with her sons. Welcome, Mai. Hello, Mai.
Hello, Bianca.
Thank you so much for joining me. I know this one is tricky to do because it's me. And I know it's difficult to not perhaps turn this into a therapy session. But I'm very grateful to have you here and to talk through this interview and the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Where would you like to start with this one? I'm not sure how to ask the first question. I suppose, what was the biggest takeaway for you from my experience and James' experience, and perhaps the difference, because we experience something unique together? I think as mothers and fathers, you go through the whole process in a weird together way, because for the female, you have to feel it all. You're physically going through all the changes through pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding and the resetting of your hormones and all that sort of stuff. And the dad's there for the whole trip, but they experience it so differently.
Yeah, they do. I think also for background, I think it's relevant to note that I put a 2-week pause on doing this discussion, because after having listened to you and James and being a mum myself and listening to it during my luteal phase and just being so emotional, and you don't want that. You want me to provide my psychological professional opinion or whatever or whatnot. So I actually said to you, can we rebook this, because it wouldn't have been a useful discussion with me at that time. And I think not just because what you and James went through was just a horrific experience. I think what I really resonated with was being a mum, and I'm a mum of 2 boys. And so as I'm hearing you discuss all this, I couldn't help but place myself in that. And so that brings to your question, right, of how your experience highlights how everyone experiences grief differently and trauma differently. And in the example that you guys give and how amazing you guys were to get through it and be stronger on the other side, that's not always the case. And how there has to be space for people to process stuff differently and experience stuff differently, because we come to these things, we don't come to them, they're thrust on us with different skills and different baggage and different strengths and weaknesses. And when something like this happens that tests all of our resources, we will pull the things that we're good at and try and bury the stuff that we know is going to not be helpful. And so I think the really interesting thing about looking at how you and James coped and how you use different mechanisms for that highlights that everyone's journey is going to be different and that we have to work with what you've got.
Which can be, I think as a couple, quite frustrating, because you tic-tac, one might be coping and then one's not. And then you want to suggest, you want to share, oh, this has worked for me. Why don't you do this? And then they either avoid or they don't, or they do and it doesn't work for them.
Yep.
And it feels, I think in a grief like what we've experienced, it can feel really lonely. And I think we'll find this in future episodes of people talking about a family loss and how perhaps the siblings don't feel, not processing it anywhere near the same as what one person might be. I think that really highlights and exposes the loneliness of grief.
Absolutely. And very much what you're talking about is individually we have to work through this at our own pace. And where the friction or tension sometimes comes in a relationship like this is that we're not on the same page, where normally everything that we do relies on us being on the same page, and we are partners in business, in parenting, in running a household, and all of a sudden we're not anymore. It's often when big things like this happens, it's how we cope through it or not that is a real turning point for couples. And where I think, man, having all the support that you talked about that worked for you guys, and just the fact that you had excellent communication skills to start with, and going, well, let's build on that because we had to. I really think is one of the key strengths that you guys had, just being able to continue being open with each other, because you don't know what's happening on the inside of someone's mind, right? And whatever experience the person that you knew before this event, you still don't know what this is going to do and how this is going to sit. James used his own strategies, but just recognising that you each need to do it, and recognising that you might be frustrated and pissed off and angry and resentful that the other person isn't on the same journey or isn't able to support you. And I think that's one of the biggest things is you normally rely on this person for support, and you often can't. Or as you say, it fluctuates, right? When one's up, the other one can be down. And I think we naturally do this because we feel like we can let our guard down or be vulnerable if the other one's in a strong space. How do you decide that when something like this has happened?
Yeah, to try to support each other in a time when you're both in immense pain. It's really, really, really fucking hard.
I feel like I need to do the interviewing. So, we talked about what got you through and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that I really took out of that is feeling, and that it comes back to when everything else is stripped bare, what was really clear is what you were each feeling, right? And this is how I feel. And it's working with that. It's that primary emotion. That's that actual bodily response to that. And each of you had really interesting strategies of working through that. I don't know, for James, it was running. It was throwing himself into manifesting the pain he was feeling in physical pain. And obviously both of you were feeling physical aches and pains and strain and all of that because of the stress you guys are under. You talk about massage as being something that was an essential part of you getting through each day because it physically alleviated not just the physical tension of it, but it was a way of matching, or at least going some way to kind of connect the psychological and then the bigger physical feeling, and how important that is to actually connect you back to space when stuff was just, you didn't know where you were. And so for James, the running was such an important part for him. One of the things I really enjoyed listening to James was he found it difficult to articulate. He didn't do the talking support stuff that you naturally fell to and wanting to do. And yet in events and pushing himself, having the excuse and having the societal permission to cry, to spit, to blubber, to wreck himself, to absolutely wreck himself physically, and that's an okay, socially normal thing, an acceptable thing to do in an event, in a massive big running event or in any sort of physical sporting event, then he got his release. Then he was able to have his internal feelings resonate with his physical feelings. And so thankfully he had that. He had running.
Yes, and I'm so grateful that he had that tool in his toolbox to draw upon, and that had been established well before what happened. It's a really great thing that he had that. At what point is it that people can talk about their trauma too much from a therapist perspective? I know that there's a fine line of not talking about it enough and then talking about it too much. I sometimes felt that perhaps I could articulate it and talk about it too easily, and that maybe sometimes I felt perhaps I was stuck in the trauma, and perhaps the adrenaline, like the chaos of it all. The chaos of it all made me feel sometimes closer to him. What would you say from a therapy perspective? Is someone talking about things too much?
My first question was, what's the timeline? When was this beneficial for you?
I'd say in the first few months. Like if anyone would give me maybe even longer, maybe the first 6 months, if someone gave me the moment to talk about it, I would give them every single blow. I would probably go too in depth if they allowed me.
How did you feel afterwards?
Better.
So then I would say that it's beneficial. And it's interesting you say the chaos of it all. That was, and again, a bit like James, I feel like what you were potentially doing was giving almost like a physical form to the chaos inside you by expressing what had happened and all that I know that you really wanted to understand. So you absolutely made the poor postie run laps and laps to deliver books and stuff like that, because part of your coping was to understand. And I think all of us, it's part of the process is to understand as much as we can what happened, or unfortunately sometimes why, and that can be a sticking point, but to try and to fill those gaps is therapeutic. And so for you, in being able to articulate, so you read all this stuff but then articulate it to others, and I'm sure we'll talk later on about the very different part of our brain that is, so we've got like this internal monologue, or when we're reading and when we're processing, is very different to when we're actually expressing it. So whether we're talking to someone, talk therapy, or talking to friends, that's also talk therapy, or if we're journaling, writing it down. So if we're actually expressing in words how we're feeling and articulating it externally is very different and provides other benefits to thinking things through in your mind. So when you're expressing this to people and you're giving your internal chaos space and form, and then seeing how that lands in others, so your internal grief, your rage, all of that sort of stuff. And so when you express that and you see that land in another human being, that gives you reassurance that the internal chaos that you're feeling, others get a small sense of why that is. So it helps normalise that.
Yeah, I guess it was confirmation that what we experienced was horrific. And I think I needed that for quite some time, because I often wanted to downplay what we went through at times. I mean, I think I was probably seeking a lot of confirmation that it was okay for me to be in as much pain as I was, and I needed other people to confirm that to me, because otherwise I just wanted to put on, I don't know, is it that warrior kind of like, and just get on with it, just get on with life sort of.
Yes, and I think, as we'll talk about in other episodes, that will come and bite you on the bum. And I also wonder how much of the way we've been socialised, it's much more acceptable to give a scientific or even just a blow account of what happened to someone, and then they can try and appreciate, because they're a human being and hopefully not, devoid of any emotion, then they can go, oh, insert emotion here. Because the other way of expressing what you've been through is to give your emotional, visceral response, but that's not socially appropriate. And so what you're left with is explaining what's happened. And I think in all the learning and all the bits and pieces, like the complexity of that, once you explain that complexity, it goes without saying that was some seriously shit stuff. And so your question around was at what point does it become too much? And when I asked you, how did you feel afterwards? The fact that you felt better or felt relief, then that's a good thing. And I think, being the in-tune human being that you are, you would pick your audience. And as you said, if they asked, or if they gave you the sense of body language, or if they said, yes, I'll have a coffee with you, knowing what you were going through, you've picked your audience of someone who can sit with that. And because that's the other thing, we are feeling human beings, and just sitting with someone face to face in the same presence, we're mirroring chemicals within ourselves, right? So not everyone, and as you spoke about, not everyone can be with you at that time because of whatever else they're going through. So if you found a captive audience and you were reading their signals that they can sit and be with you in this, of course that's therapeutic.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. In terms of the difference of James and I went knowledge seeking, and would you say a sense of I wanted to try and control my journey of grief, and then James's response of almost freezing and avoidance. Can you talk me through a little bit about the differences there?
Yeah. The experience that you guys went through every day was a new hurdle, challenge, horrific experience of understanding. You had no schema. You were relying on these people giving you information so that you could make the next decision. The not knowing, the not being in control. The bit that you could control is to arm yourself with as much information as you possibly could. And so that's a coping mechanism. And so interesting, the difference then between you and James, it's probably afterwards, right? When you weren't faced with these decisions, but you were still trying to come to terms and understand what had happened and what happened to other people in similar circumstances. And whether that talks to your different personalities, I don't know, but I think very much just the recognition that you had so much control, every bit of control removed from you. And so the bit that we hold on to is what we can control. And you see this so much in when I'm working with people, and when I hear people say I'm a control freak or whatever else, it's just like a little note that goes into my mind to go, well, why? What aspect of your life doesn't feel like you have controls to make you want to control this bit? And I think parents are a really good example of that. You put routines. You think that you can have a routine for your kids' sleep and all that sort of stuff. The reason we do that is because we have no control at the end of the day. They wake up when they want. And so we seek to understand stuff, to put routines in place so that we can try and control something. And very much for you, any semblance of knowledge or information that you could get to kind of feel like you were in more control is what you sought after. And then James talks about later on, after the initial storm, right? And his thing to control was to look after you and to do what he could to parent Claude and all that sort of stuff. So that was something that he could hold on to. And then the more that he could see that things were moving on and that's when he started like that numbing, that, well, I could control that now what am I left with? And so the sort of freeze response that he had, because he did not yet have the capacity to deal with all that other stuff. So that's really interesting. And you spoke about the way that a couple copes through this, but even just us individuals, whether we're going through the same thing or not, depending on our internal resources and what we naturally go to feel better, will determine what we do about that. And when I speak to other people who talk about whether they've turned to alcohol or other drugs or any sort of form of addiction and they feel really guilty and shame around that, to reframe it like, I'm pleased you did that. That was a coping mechanism. If you didn't do that, the alternative would be probably more permanent and dire. And so to be really gentle on ourselves and not judgmental of whatever coping mechanism we have used at the time, I find it such sense of comfort that naturally we will go to whatever coping mechanism we can at the time. And if that's a freeze response, then that's what we're doing to cope in that moment.
Yeah, it's not to think negatively or demonize or that it's bad. Whatever way you've got through to survive or to cope is okay.
It's okay.
But I guess because of media and movies and stories and lack thereof, not so much now, I think, because of the vast podcast world and somewhat social media, we now do have stories and lived experience of real people to share and to understand. But for a long time, and especially when it comes to these taboo topics, which is TFMR, I had no idea it was an acronym. I had no idea what other people's experience of it was. I'd known about stillbirth. I'd known about miscarriage, early term abortion. TFMR, completely not on my radar.
Yep.
And then to realise that there's this vast community and all manners of coping was really the big part for me to grasp and to hold on to. Yep. And I guess that's the whole purpose of this, is to try to share those stories to make people feel less like however they've coped or coping was not bad, not good. It just is, isn't it?
I couldn't help but think of how crap the movie would be of the, I'm thinking of even like Bridget Jones's stories, and there's like the snippet of this binge drinking, smoking, chain smoking person on the couch, but it only lasts for a bit and then it goes off into this other romantic story and whatever else. That's not realistic. I think it should, if it was more realistic, it would be like a much more realistic story of overcoming grief and transitioning through that would be, I want to say, the Bridget Jones story. If it's a 2-hour movie, it needs to be an hour of 45 minutes of her sitting on the couch eating ice cream, smoking and drinking, and then like the 15 minutes of her maybe just, I don't know, chancing upon someone in, I don't know, at a nightclub. That's much more realistic, I think.
Yep.
But it doesn't make for good movies.
No, it doesn't.
No. So I think one of the great pleasures, and I feel very humbled in being able to support people through this, if they do get some professional support and come and see someone like me in practice, is I get to normalise their experience. And really I think that goes so much of the way, and usually unfortunately because of the system, they're waiting a while before they come and see someone anyway, or because they don't feel ready or the taboo around it, whatever, they don't come and talk to someone because they don't feel like they can until they're broken. And so usually they've done all the work before they come and see me. So it's like, you're still here. You've just told me this horrific story of what's happened to you and you're still here. What have you done so far to be here? And then they go, my friends have been amazing and I just knew that I shouldn't start drinking because I'd done that before, so I didn't do that. I'm trying to keep walking the dog. And so they're doing the stuff. Your body naturally wants to survive and it generally knows what it needs.
Therapy can almost sometimes be just a confirmation for you, like a bit of a pat on the head to go, actually, I don't have the answers for you, but you've already been doing fine. Keep on doing what you're doing. Yep. It can sometimes be a comforting confirmation.
Yep. And that's what I'll say. I am just a mirror. So and there's no good psychologist will tell you what to do. They are basically, I guess, teasing out the strengths that you already have, which brings us kind of back to the point that you made about when something happens monumental in a family, how hard that can be on the couple or the siblings or whoever it might be that are sharing in that experience. And so the assumption is that they are sharing the same experience, but they're not. And you look to the other person to mirror, to have it mirrored in you how to cope and to have your needs met, if you like, because that's the deal when you sign up to be with someone. And yet you cannot rely on them to help get you through this necessarily, because they're hurting just as much but differently. And I think that's really challenging, and why it's so important for both of you. And I hate that I am, but I'm thinking of a Venn diagram, right? And that's awful because they're horrible. But you are in charge of yourself, and you can certainly get help. But at the end of the day, you have the internal mechanisms to get yourself through this, or to enlist the support to get yourself through that. And then both of you together can kind of boost each other up. They can't see my hands, can they? No. I'm making kind of circles, which it doesn't anyway. So I think this is an absolute brutal reminder of actually you have to do this alone. You can sit beside someone, you can go along the ride of this together, but you have to do this each mostly internally yourself. You can't expect the other person to fix you.
And that's the brutal truth of it. It's really hard to accept that you're the only person that can do the work. I wanted to ask you as well about how can you help create space for yourself but give other people space? And I always find it difficult to try to explain, because people think that it's about physical space or time, and it's not always about that. I know in my experience, the people that gave me space was actually perhaps sitting in silence, or just an appropriate moment where they would ask a deeper question and you knew that they were going to be okay with your honest answer, instead of walking down the street and there's people everywhere and you're needing to get to an appointment and they need to go somewhere as well, and they go, oh, how are you? And I mean, they're probably genuinely asking, but you don't have the time or space to answer that. And I guess I try and recommend it to people to consider in their journey of healing from anything, not just grief. But I find it really hard to articulate. Can you help me?
Yes. So I keep coming back to this when you're talking about this safety, and the metaphor that I had in my head is, I don't know, it could be in a kid's movie or something, but like imagining putting I think like they're called like a firefly in a bottle. And the image I was getting is this little firefly just going nuts in a bottle, just flying around, zapping around. And I feel like what you're talking about are these incredible people in our life that hold space for us, a safe space for us to collapse, to be, to whatever it needs to be, to have that permission and have that safety and recognition from someone else. You're not doing it alone. And that could be, I recall a fantastic friend when I was having a bit of crap stuff happening, and I remember them saying, you sound like crap, come over, the door's open, have a sleep, I'll be there at 12, we'll have a cup of tea, but you just need to sleep, you sound awful. And the sense of being seen, being just them holding space for me, not knowing that they didn't have to say anything or do anything. It was the recognition of, I know that you're not okay and that's okay, and there is a safe space for you to not be okay, and I'll be there when you're ready.
Would you say then space is almost showing up? We talk about that often in grief conversations about, it's not, the worst thing you can do is say, let me know what you need. We hated that because there was no capacity for us to ask for help. I think in this day and age, we are all pretty hopeless at asking for help. And it can be a sign of, I guess, weakness, or we feel we owe something, or we're taking something away when we do ask for help. So I know I find asking for help really hard. So it was those instead that would be like, I'm coming around, or I'm dropping this off at your door. You don't need to come out, but it's going to be at your door. Here's a meal. Here's this. I'm taking the kids here. I'm going to come and get Claude.
so you can have an hour to yourself. It was showing up in a way that is an example of how you can give people space and not having to cook or not having to make a decision. I know that for me, making decisions was incredibly hard. I think I felt a bit of decision fatigue, particularly because of everything we had to go through with Herb and all the decisions we did have to make. So to just decide what to eat for dinner was impossible for me. If you gave me even 2 options in front of me, couldn't decide.
Yep.
I'd just be frozen. So for someone to just say, I'm dropping this off, gave me space to think about other things, to feel other things instead of the paralysis of having to decide what to cook for the family for dinner.
I also think there's almost that sense of, how's this important? I know that having a good, healthy meal is important, but I don't have the mental capacity for it. And why should I even be deciding that right now with everything that's going on? Like, this shouldn't be important. And for me to give this brain space at the moment is, it's so complex, isn't it? I think also what you're talking about there in terms of space and these incredible people in our lives, at this time, when things like this happened, you have no capacity to give to others. You are so vulnerable. And the thing about relationships, friendship, intimate or otherwise, it's transactional. And for it to be an effective relationship, it needs to be equal. But when it's like this, when things like this happen and you cannot give, it's so difficult sometimes that there's a huge shift, right? Because it no longer becomes a two-way transaction. And so the friends or the people, and you talked about how it was really interesting, the people who could support or who came out of the woodworks, who were able to hold that space, and for other reasons, other people that you thought might have been able to couldn't because of their own feelings, vulnerabilities in that space. So for those people to go, right, this is an example of where this doesn't need to be two-way transactional. We're giving to you. There is no expectation, obligation you give back. And so for you to be able to, for you not even to have to worry about having that negotiation, for that just to be given. And also to know that they've held space for you.
And it's even in text messages. There was some people that would send you these beautiful long messages, but you felt the obligation you had to respond. They needed you to respond. Whereas others would send beautiful messages and they might actually explicitly say, you don't need to respond. I'll talk to you sometime soon. That was actually giving space as well.
And even the other way of thinking about it is it's not further draining you. We talk about people being taps or batteries, and so we know the friends that we have where it's like, oh, I don't want to see them because they're draining or whatever, and we love hanging out with the people who charge us up. But when you are going through some big shit, then you can't give. And for someone to recognise that and to give to you to boost you up without any expectation of you having to give back at the moment, there is so much safety and comfort and love. I think also there is an unsaid, that this is temporary, and it might even be expressed, you were there for us when this happened. So there is a sense that we're passing through this. We recognise that we've got you. You're not alone. We don't have to be in your face or in your space, but you're not alone, and we're here when we get through this.
It reminds me of, and forgive me for not remembering who quotes this. It's on a podcast about how you should have sort of 3 types of relationships. One is savings, people that you walk away going, oh, I feel really good. They filled my cup. And then there's neutral, the ones that it's not taking out of your cup but not necessarily giving. And then the ones that are taxing, and you walk away going, oh, okay, I won't see them for another few months now. They've just zapped me. And I think it's doubling down in those really tough times to the people that do give you savings.
And then also there's a inherent in that is you being able to identify that in yourself and for them in themselves. And this comes back to this concept of ensuring that we all create space in our lives to check in. And I don't like the word self-care because it's in our narrative, in our societal narrative now in culture, that is a privilege, and it just can't be, not in the state of our mental health state and burnout and all that sort of stuff. So if we talk about self-maintenance, and the dishwasher and ensuring that we're actually functioning so that we can just be and do and survive. Part of that maintenance is actually to check in with ourselves, to do both a body and mental scan, if you like, to be able to actually have a sense of what we have capacity to do today. It's as little as checking. Like, you don't get in a car and just, hopefully you don't, get in a car and drive off and then realise that you've got no fuel.
Yeah.
But we do. We exit the house. We've got this little niggling feeling when we wake up of going, oh, God, I can't face today. But then we just keep going and then we burn out and then we get snappy at our kids and our partners and then make our life worse. So even just having that space every day to check in, and this comes with the zero judgment space, right? I think sometimes when something like this happens, we have different people enter our life, or other people that we might have expected come into our life haven't. We don't know what they're going through, and they might not have the capacity to give in that time, and that's okay. And so if everyone just checked in and was conscious of everyone else checking into themselves and having zero judgment around that, then I think our lives would be a little bit easier, but we're also human.
Yes. And it's a really great point, and it reminds me of how I'm lucky I had the insight, took a little bit, but lucky I had the insight to say no, and to what you just said reminded me of how if someone reached out to me and said, hey, let's go for coffee, I'd be like, yep, great, let's do Monday. And then another friend might message, or I want to see someone and they're like, how's Tuesday? And I'm like, no, I've already spent my tickets.
Mm-hmm.
I need to check in with myself. And I've realised when I organise too many social things, I leave actually sometimes feeling, I don't know when I'm not going to not be seen. I don't know when a social interaction is going to leave me going, oh, they haven't recognised where I'm at, my grief herb at all. So I knew then to give myself a day where I did not plan one thing. Even myself, I would know, don't go and ask someone if they're free on that day, because that's the day I know I've had a social interaction the day before. I need to have the day off. So I do that intermittently, and I just make sure that I checked in with myself. But I mean, that took a while.
Okay.
That definitely took me some time to realise that, oh God, all these catch-ups with people, because I thought that was healthy. I thought that was good for me to get out of the house and go and see a friend. But I would leave and I'd come home and I'd be shattered, or I'd just be really upset. I'd be really emotional. I'd be like on the floor, sort of like griefy. And I knew that I just needed to recoup and just spend the day with myself or James, or just at home the next day. So,
yeah. And that's so telling of, well, it's so important in anything. And honestly, I think that's probably the best advice I could give to anyone, for whatever reason they're seeing me, is to coach them, if they don't already know, on how to check in with themselves, because I don't know what they need. But unfortunately, many of us don't have that skill, or have had to go through stuff to develop that skill of, no, I need to put myself first. And again, I think it's a societal and cultural thing of, a lot of us, I think there's a shift, but there's a lot of us, we are modelled to give, to be givers, because it's seen as being the good, right thing to do, to give to other people at the expense of yourself if necessary. So one of the best things I can do for someone is to help give them the skills, and one of those is actually just creating space in your day to check in with yourself to see what you need, and then go from there. And absolutely, as you say, if you check in with yourself that morning and go, I can't, it's not fair on that person, it's not fair on myself, it's not fair on the people that rely on me, for me to force myself to go to this interaction when I know that there is the potential. And a lot of the time it's just not having enough buffer. You're already close to running on the red zone. There's not enough buffer there if something was to trigger, or if you were to not feel great at the end of it. And that's, again, coming back to that sense of safety and that control. So if you don't feel like there's enough buffer there, then don't do the thing that could potentially tip you. The other important teaching, lesson, whatever, or awareness to have, as well as giving yourself that space to check in, which can be super uncomfortable, especially if you got really, really good at not feeling and pushing those feelings away, because uncomfortable feelings will come in. Your brain will highlight to you the stuff that it's unsure about. It will put the spotlight on the gaps in your knowledge, on the uncertainties in your life when you create space, and that can be frightening. The other awareness to have, I think, is because we are these incredibly over-adaptive humans, we have the capacity to think about how we think. And that really can trip us up sometimes. It's great, but it can also really trip us up. And so when we're scanning and checking in with ourselves, to be aware of primary emotions and secondary emotions. So our primary emotions are, okay, I'm checking in with myself. How am I feeling? I might be feeling tired. I might be feeling overwhelmed. I might be feeling melancholy because I'm exhausted. They are your bodily reactions, chemicals flowing through you to give you a message that, so hopefully you behave in a manner that'll help that, right? Your secondary emotions might be these. Why can't I get up and do something? Why am I constantly feeling like melancholy? Or, I should be tough enough to get through this. Why? I'm so useless. Like, why can't I I'm so annoyed. Or, I'm afraid that I've been here before. Is this me relapsing back into depression? So these are secondary emotions. These are emotions that we layer on top of those primary emotions. These are judgment emotions, and they are so useless and so damaging and so normal. But I guess just an awareness that listen into the primary emotions, acknowledge the secondary emotions, but try to judgment-free, acknowledge them, and then hopefully just let them be.
Don't give them the power. And just because you've had that thought doesn't mean it's true.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such a good reminder. Just because we have a thought doesn't make it fact.
I think that's a great point to finish with. I want to thank you so much. Getting to know you while we go through these interviews has been really special. And I thank you so much for having to sob and listen to our episode and then to join me with this.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thank you. It's an amazing gift you're giving to other people.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is dedicated to my son Herbert and to all the fellow grievers out there. I'm sorry that you're here. Be kind to others, but mostly to yourself. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to mention that whilst I do have a degree in behavioural science and have spent years educating myself and researching the topics of trauma and mental health, I'm not a licensed therapist, counsellor or psychologist. Everything I share here is based on personal experience and things I've learnt through education. This podcast is for informational or entertainment purposes only and isn't the substitute for professional advice. If you're struggling, please reach out to a GP or a qualified therapist. You're not alone and there is help available.